Back here, WHIP, Philly's #1 college radio station, 215-204-9449 is the number if you want to call and hang with us. Zach Gelb, Haley Condon here with you. Now joining us is the editor for OWLSCOOP.com, and that's John DiCarlo. John, Zach, and Haley, how are you?
Good. How you doing, guys?
Well, we're doing great, and we had brought you in with a little Bruce Springsteen. Is John DiCarlo a big Bruce Springsteen fan?
Yeah, I like the boss. I've seen him a couple of times. I'm not. Some of my friends are borderline religious about it, so I'm not quite at that level. But I saw him at the Spectrum a couple of years ago before they tore the Spectrum down, and another time I saw him, he was a surprise guest at a U2 show, and the roof nearly blew off the place. So that was pretty cool. So, but I like him. That was a good choice. I like what you guys are doing over there.
My dad, yeah, he worked in the Philadelphia area for many years, actually, and he was always telling me there was nothing like Bruce at the Spectrum, and we've seen him all over. My dad's one of those Bruce Springsteen religious followers, so it's great to know that John DiCarlo loves Bruce Springsteen. I know you were over at the basketball tour yesterday. I saw you over there with Fran Dunphy. Give us a little preview of this basketball facility.
I mean, it looks terrific, and I've talked to a couple of other Division I assistants that have been friends with for a while, and they tell me that it really puts them on par with just about any place in the country. And I mean, it kind of, like Fran said, it puts them in the neighborhood. It's unique. It's different. It's a little symbolic that it's built right on top of Pearson and McGonigal, and you know how Fran is. He's very respectful of tradition, and he said, okay, we have the facility now. We got to go out and play and be respectful of the guys that came before us, because Eddie Jones and Aaron McKee and Rick Brunson and Mark Jackson, those guys were had a little tiny locker that would remind you of what you had in junior high and high school, and they'd go out and go to a bunch of Elite Eights and win a ton of games. So I mean, the facility's beautiful. I mean, they've been practicing there since January, and what has now been completed is all the stuff in the front, the trophy cases, the touch screens, the things on the wall with the current rosters, the touch screen you can go over and look at past Temple players, the artwork, the theater that they have to watch film. I think one of the coolest things is that video screen they have out on the court. Like Fran said, and I wrote about this, if I don't know, let's say Anthony Lee didn't hedge on a screen, he said, "Coach, I was in the right place." He'd say, "Hey, come here, I want to show you what you did wrong," and you can literally walk him over and say, "This is what you did wrong." So yeah, it's a beautiful facility. It's been long overdue, but it puts them, as we said, in that same stratosphere with anything you'd see around the country. And facilities matter to kids when you're recruiting them. They actually have access to it 24/7, so they can swipe in there. If Khalif Wyatt wants to go shoot around at 3 in the morning with Will Cummings, he can go do that. So it's a terrific facility, and it's an important step for the program, especially with them heading into the Big East next year.
This Owls team, they lost a plethora of talent. 4 out of their 6 leading scorers didn't return from last year, but they were able to replace a lot of those guys. Daniel Dingle comes in. They had some recruits from WVU and BU come in. This team has a lot of depth. Is this the year we finally see another Fran Dunphy team go deep into the tournament?
They have all the pieces to do it, and I would probably argue. We're talking about it now, but predictions are kind of useless. But if you're asking me if they have a chance to be good or be better, I would say yes. And that's with all due respect to Juan Fernandez and Ramon Moore and Mike Eric. But for starters, the biggest piece that they're getting back is Scooty Randall. And realistically, Scooty probably could have started playing again by the end of January, early February, but he had a tough decision to make in saying, do I want a full senior season, or do I want to try to help the team now? Before he got hurt with his initial foot injury and then the meniscus injury, he was playing as well as anybody on that team, shooting nearly 50%, averaging about 12 points a game. He's their best perimeter defender, and that team last year was honestly quite disappointing defensively. They didn't defend well. Yeah, they missed having Lavoy Allen in the paint and cleaning up things. If somebody took a gamble on the perimeter and somebody came in, Lavoy could erase a lot of mistakes. And yeah, they had Mike Eric out and they had Scooty Randall out, but they really miss Scooty. They miss his voice. He's a communicator on defense. He moves his feet well. He can defend along the perimeter. He can defend in the paint if he has to. So having him back will be huge. Having a guy like Jake O'Brien, who you kind of alluded to before, the transfer from BU, he's about 6'9", 6'10". He can play a little bit inside, but he's probably at his best, with the ball screen stuff, and he can knock down threes. Dalton Pepper will give him some talent too. I mean, he's a guy who really does have the ability to start, but might ultimately come off the bench. And he was a terrific player at Pennsbury High School, played with Lavoy Allen, almost came to Temple and decided on West Virginia and is now transferred here. And of course you have Khalif. I think Will Cummings needs to see extended minutes on this team. He's the quickest guard they have, and he gives them an element that that Juan and Ramon, quite frankly, didn't give them. They were a little bit more deliberate as guards, bringing the ball up the floor. They thrive on misdirection and kind of, that kind of savvy way of playing like Khalif does. Will can really push the ball if he needs to. So the interesting thing will be to see if Fran decides to start him, if he goes with a veteran at the point like TJ. But they have a lot of interchangeable parts. And, yeah, Daniel Dingle can play minutes. Quentin DeCozy is probably as good a guard as they've brought in since Fran's been here. He was probably the best guard at his size in the state of New Jersey last year, with maybe the exception of a kid like Kyle Anderson who's going on to UCLA. But, yeah, they have the talent to make a tournament run. Now they just got to do it. Getting to the tournament, they've been there. They've done that. They don't want to be out in the first round. They don't want to be out in the second round. They want to get to the Sweet 16. They want to get to the Elite Eight. And there's no reason they don't have a chance to do that.
We're all cognizant of what happened with Khalif down in Atlantic City. There's going to be no suspension for his actions. Is Khalif ready to be the leader of this team? Because he has a big role this year on this roster.
I think so. I mean, I know it's a huge cliche, but I think he leads by example. And, obviously Khalif was really at the wrong place at the wrong time, and it was a boneheaded mistake. But I like Khalif. I've been watching him play. I went to go cover a few of his games when he was a senior at Norristown. Where he needs to clean things up is don't oversleep, don't be 20 minutes late to a study hall. But he's not a bad kid. I mean, he's a good teammate. I mean, God forbid, when you play and you score points and you can lead by example, guys are going to follow you. And all sorts of things broke down in that tournament game against South Florida, and it was ugly. But at the end of the day, Khalif Wyatt was the only one fearlessly driving to the rim, trying to draw contact. Yes, he got whistled for that technical foul, but he was the only one showing emotion down the stretch. I didn't see that from Juan Fernandez. I didn't see that from Ramon Moore, and I like those guys. I wish them well. They're playing over in Italy. They had terrific careers here. But, I mean, Khalif has played well in big games. I mean, he was the best guard on the floor when they beat Duke, better than Austin Rivers. I'm not saying that Austin Rivers isn't a terrific player, but Khalif has stepped up in big games, and that has a piece when it comes to talking about leadership. So I think he's ready, but I think Scooty will be the leader on that team. Like Fran always says, we missed his voice last year. He's the most vocal guy. Khalif can be a vocal guy, but I think those two are really going to be your two leaders, with Scooty maybe doing even more of the talking out there on the floor.
We're talking to John DeCarlo of OWLSCOOP, the great editor for that website. And let's get to the football team now. There's been rumors about a 12th game possibly being added to Hawaii. What are you hearing about that?
Hearing all sorts of stuff. I do know that both sides are trying to get it done. For Temple, the obvious buy-in is it gives you a chance to be bowl eligible. If you're 5-6 after 11 games, you're talking about playing a Hawaii team that's really been terrible this year. Their only win is against an FCS program. They're 1-5. Norm Chow is kind of struggling early on getting things started over there. Somebody told me that some of Hawaii's players were either tweeting, and I didn't get a chance to look into this, but they're either tweeting or putting on Facebook that it's a done deal. I have not been able to confirm that it's a done deal, but I do know that both sides are definitely...
It's close from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, it's very close. And it's nothing new because Temple's been trying with a few other programs to get that 12th game. As you know, when they went over to the Big East, they basically inherited West Virginia's schedule, but they had 11 games. So, if you get that 12th game, again, that's the whole buy-in. And we both know this Temple team has some holes in it, but if they can go 6-6 and be bowl eligible in their first season in the Big East, that's quite a step. Even despite all the deficiencies and despite the turnovers and some of the struggles they've had. And if you're bowl eligible in the Big East, you're gonna the Big East has better bowl tie-ins in the MAC, better payouts, better exposure. So again, I've heard it's very close. I have not been able to confirm that it's a done deal. Now, somebody told me that Temple will actually wait, or might actually wait until the 9th week of the season or on their schedule to make a decision on it. That would, to me, imply that the decision is in Temple's hands. But Hawaii has been given clearance by their conference to play the game. So it's close. I think it's just a couple of other pieces that need to be figured out, but nothing has been set in stone yet from what I've heard.
I mean, if the Owls want to get to a bowl game, one player that has to start playing up to his abilities is Chris Coyer. Had a dreadful game going up against Rutgers with the fumbles and the interceptions. He'll get the start this week. Is he the right man under center for this team for the rest of the year?
Yeah, for a few reasons. Number one, and sorry if this sounds too harsh, he's the best quarterback in the program.
Not a lot of talent.
No, Juice Granger's not ready. Connor Riley's a terrific kid. He's got a great arm, but he was not recruited for this offense. And Kevin Newsom, despite, and Kevin's a smart kid and a terrific guy. He's great to talk football with. I'm glad they have him here, but he's behind the 8 ball. He came in late, and there's a reason he struggled at Penn State. He was inconsistent at Penn State, and he hasn't exactly, from what we can see in practice, he doesn't stand out in practice. So A, he's behind. B, he's just as inconsistent a passer. I'd love to see them give him a shot at safety. Throwing him in at wide receiver is tough. You don't just automatically become a wide receiver overnight. But Chris is the best quarterback in the program. Yes, he struggled. Yes, there are throws he'd like to have back. But I do think sometimes that the kid gets hammered a little too unfairly because this line is not great. He had a terrific line to play behind last year when you had Wayne Tribute, Derek Dennis. Even when John Palumbo went down at center, Jeremy Schoenbrunner stepped in and played really well. This line's been inconsistent at best. I mean, even when he overthrew that, when he misfired on that pass at Penn State, what people don't realize is there was a big jailbreak up the middle, and he had to get rid of the ball. Now, granted, his throw to the touchdown pass last week wasn't pretty, and he'll admit it. That was intended for Kenny Harper, and Cody Booth saved him. So he doesn't, some of his passes aren't leading receivers, some of his passes aren't on target, but the line isn't playing well. His perimeter receivers aren't good. His best receiver is Jalen Fitzpatrick, who's coming out of the slot. He's not getting a whole lot of help from Deion Miller. He's not getting a whole lot of help from a guy like Alex Jackson. I mean, I'd love to see them roll Chris out more, and they roll him out. He puts a pass right on Alex Jackson's numbers, and he drops it. Now, Alex Jackson is worlds more athletic than Cody Booth, but he just hasn't been able to lock down that position because he's been inconsistent. And, I don't think the play calling helps out Chris either. I don't know that they're utilizing him like they could. I think they could roll him out more. I think he's a good zone read quarterback. I mean, they definitely run him his fair share. But I don't know if he's a guy that you want to have drop back and let him be like a stone-foot guy in the pocket and just sit back there and try to pick a defense apart because the line isn't great. So, I mean, he knows he has to play better, but he knows that offense inside out better than anybody else. And he's a guy who, for better or for worse, is going to be there for you at the end. I mean, for as poorly as he played against UConn, those 2 throws down the stretch, I mean, he put the one to Deion Miller right on the money. He put the one to Jalen Fitzpatrick right on the money. So he needs to be more consistent with his mechanics. When he is, he'll throw a tight spiral. Again, he's not Steve Young. He's not Mike Vick. But he may not be a quarterback that can carry that offense right now by himself, but he needs help from the guys around him. Until he gets help from the guys around him, you're going to see some inconsistency with him.
Zach Gelb, Haley Condon here with you on WHIP, Philly's #1 college radio station. 215-204-9449 is the number as we're talking to the fantastic editor for OWLSCOOP.com, John DeCarlo. John, a few more questions right before we let you run. Tino Sunseri, he's the quarterback this week for the Pittsburgh team. He's made some improvements throughout the course of the season. Vaughn Caraway's coming back from that suspension from the NCAA. Tino Sunseri, I have to imagine they throw the ball a little bit more with him this week up against this week's secondary for the Owls?
Yeah, he's really, really turned things around. Now, granted, he hasn't had the best coaching around him. I mean, Pitt's coaching situation prior to them bringing in Paul Chryst was obviously a mess. Dave Wannstedt wasn't exactly developing quarterbacks well down the stretch, and then you had the mess with bringing the guy from Miami of Ohio. He gets arrested for the domestic stuff. Todd Graham didn't do a great job. Chryst I think he's a terrific coach, and his record speaks for itself with what he did at
very
at
smart
Wisconsin.
too.
Yeah.
I've heard him in his press conference. He's fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at Sunseri's stats. He already has as many touchdown passes as he did all last year. So he's got 10 touchdowns, 2 picks. I mean, he's completing almost 69% of his passes. You look at what he's done over the last few weeks, over the past 5 games. 71% of his passes completed, 1,361 yards. 8 touchdowns and only 1 pick. I mean, that's great quarterback play. And I give this kid a lot of credit because he's been very much an embattled player over there. A lot of fans, through the wonders of message boards, which I deal with plenty of times over at OWLSCOOP, he's really, really taken a lot of heat, but he's playing very well. And, it's amazing what good coaching and good game planning does for you. I mean, the same thing's going on at Penn State. Look at what McGloin's doing over there. He's got granted a guy who, coached Tom Brady, but when you've got a good system around you and you have good play calling that fits what you do, the numbers, if you have even a decent amount of ability, are going to follow. So he's a guy, who really, if Temple doesn't tighten things up, he could really hurt them on those seam routes like UConn did in the first half a couple weeks ago, like Gary Nova started to do in the second half last week. And then you have two outstanding running backs. I mean, Ray Graham is starting to look better and better each week. Now, he was out last year with a knee injury, but he's one of the better cutback runners in the country. He must have been watching all sorts of film of LaShawn McCoy before him at Pitt. I mean, he's good. And this kid, Russell Shell, who's ninth in the Big East in rushing right now, he was just a stud running back coming out of Hopewell High School outside of Pittsburgh out there. So they have not one but two backs they can throw at you. Great receivers they can throw at you. So, to me, I think one of the things, Steve keeps talking about how young Temple is. We're young, we're young, we're young. Well, you are in some positions, but you're not that young. I'm kind of ripping off that line from Wedding Crashers that that they used to throw around to Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn. They're not. I mean, Vaughn Caraway, yes, he's relatively new to playing free safety, but he's a senior. Justin Gilday is a senior. Zamel Johnson.
Linebackers, they're young, though, and that's been the best part of the team.
But they're playing well. Your younger players are some of your best players. Nate Smith isn't making a ton of mistakes.
Matakevich.
Tyler Matakevich would probably tackle his own mother if he got the chance. But it's your older players on defense who aren't playing well. John Ubodi, guys like that on the defensive line, they aren't really generating a ton of pass rush for you unless they blitz. They're going to, Chuck Heater's going to have to create some pressure with blitzes. The corners, Anthony Roby's your best cover corner. He's a sophomore. These older guys like Gilday and Caraway, if Zamel Johnson's back in there, if he's regained his starting job, we'll see Saturday. Those older guys have to play better. They have to be more disciplined with their coverage. Otherwise, I'm not saying that Graham and Shell couldn't hurt them because they could, but you have linebackers that can go sideline to sideline with them, and that's a tribute to good recruiting. But the guys in the secondary have to really watch out against Nasiri, who's really clearly playing the best football of his career right now. And Pitt's a weird team to figure. They're 3-4. They've been up and down just like Temple, though. They lost to Youngstown State. Granted, they had guys suspended for that game. Then they'll go out and beat Virginia Tech. Now, granted, I know Tech's been up and down. They put 35 points on the board against Louisville in a loss. Then they beat Buffalo last week, but they kind of struggled. So it's a winnable game for Temple, but you've still got to go out there and beat them and do it on their field. Even a guy like Brandon McManus has to watch out because Heinz Field's a very, very tough stadium to kick in because the one end of it is open and it's right on the river. So it's going to be an interesting game. Very interesting game indeed.
John, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much. Let's get you on again real soon, my man. I appreciate it.
Anytime, Zach. Thanks, buddy.